Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, why haven't you signed up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, the inside scoop on all things BYU sports that I am hearing? I don't proclaim to be the BYU insider. There's a bunch of them out there, but I will pass along anything I hear to you guys, and it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. You can respond with your thoughts as well, have one-on-one conversations with myself, and it's just $5 a month to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. And the kicker, a 14-day free trial when you first sign up. You're 2 weeks, 2 full weeks before you're charged anything, and just $5 a month afterwards. So join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, Lone Peak stud Bott Mulitalo, got a 4th star on his recruiting profile, so very much deserved from 24/7 Sports, because Bott is an absolute force for the Lone Peak Knights. He has been that for 2 years now, and figures to be that again this year, but he'll be flipping sides of the field. He was a stud defensive end / just do everything defensive lineman for the Knights. And when he is at his best, Bott was a one-man wrecking crew. Just absolutely incredible. Any of you have watched Bott play, whether it's his highlight reel or been out to watch a Lone Peak game, you have seen Bott play incredible football. He has got an incredible ability, but he has decided that his future is better served to play offensive line. Now, this is very curious to me because Lone Peak, Austin Peay just signed with BYU. And by the way, Austin Peay is headed out on his mission next week, March 17th, if I recall correctly. He's headed to the Ireland-Scotland mission. So congratulations to Austin Peay. Well, he and Jared Smith, who signed with Utah State, were the bookend tackles for Lone Peak this past season. And Bott Mulitalo is moving over to offensive tackle, in theory, I think, to replace a guy like Austin Peay. Now, how does this involve BYU? Well, Bott had been committed to Oregon, had been committed for a few months to the Ducks, but after deciding to make this position change to play offensive line, he has reopened his recruitment. He's not necessarily canceling any opportunity to play with Oregon. He just says with the position change, he wants to take a step back and reevaluate things. And the 24/7 Sports story, as well as other reports, say that BYU and Utah are going to be very much still be in the mix for him as an athlete. The one thing I can say about Bott moving over to offensive tackle is he is an elite athlete, just of athleticism off the charts. That will serve him well as he makes a transition to tackle. It's not easy to go from playing defensive line where you're reacting to playing offensive line where essentially you're trying to mirror those defensive linemen that you went up against. And a guy like Bott, with his background as a defensive lineman, that will help him as he tries to understand what he's doing as an offensive tackle. Now, how will he play out of a 2 and a 3-point stance? How will he do with his drop steps, being able to pull, all that type of stuff? I'm actually not all that concerned about it because Lone Peak, the one thing that Bart Brockbank has done as head coach at Lone Peak is have elite assistants. That includes former San Francisco 49er and former BYU stud himself, Gary Peay. Yes, Connor's dad, Austin's dad, Trevor's dad. Yeah, Gary Peay is the offensive line coach at Lone Peak High School and has been that for many, many years. Gary is a technician. He absolutely understands offensive line play at a granular level. If there is one position coach in this state at the high school level, I believe they can get a guy like Bott Mulitalo to move from playing kind of a hybrid defensive end, defensive tackle role for Lone Peak to being a star left tackle in 8 months' time. It's Gary Peay. And I trust that he will work hard, speaking of Bott, to work on his craft and become the stud offensive tackle that he wants to be. I think that his height, he's listed at 6'4", 6'5", 275 pounds. That's very good size for an offensive lineman. And as I said, his athleticism, speaking of Mulitalo, it's off the charts. BYU will factor in here because I think BYU can pitch him now saying, okay, you think about this, Bott. We have had our past 3 offensive tackles at left tackle drafted. Our 4th in a guy like Caleb Etienne just recently had a top 30 visit with the Kansas City Chiefs and very much could find himself having his name called at the NFL draft this year. That's 4 for 4. Do you want to make it 5 for 5? Do you want to be the next offensive tackle for BYU drafted in the NFL? Come to BYU, play here. Your older brother committed here once upon a time. Now, Bott's older brother was one of the guys who committed from Snow College to come and play. It was Stone Mulitalo. He played at Skyridge High School. Stone ultimately never enrolled at BYU, but Bott has got really, really good genetics. He's got an incredible makeup. The athleticism at 6'4", 275 to do what he did at defensive tackle it will serve him well as he makes the transition to playing offensive tackle now. And this could be a very interesting recruiting process for BYU. They could be back in the mix for one of the elite athletes in their backyard on the recruiting scene. USC's in the mix, according to the report. Also, Utah and Oregon still there. So there's some very, very heavy, stiff competition and heavy hitters that BYU will have to fend off. But we're seeing more and more that BYU's ability to directly impact guys with NIL money, obviously be able to prove that they can win games at a high level going 11-2 a season ago. And more importantly, in the case of an offensive tackle like Mulitalo, tell them, hey, we have a direct pipeline to playing at the NFL because we have a track record of getting these guys drafted. That's got to be mighty enticing to a guy like Bott to say, hey, maybe I just want to stick around in Provo and play for the BYU Cougars. So crazy times, but I think that Bott is making a smart move. At the same time, it's a calculated move. He said that there's a history of a Polynesian offensive lineman recently going to the NFL. I think he's looking directly at what guys like Kingsley Suamataia has done with the Kansas City Chiefs. More importantly, he's looking at just other guys around the league and the incredible money that can be made as an offensive tackle at the NFL level. Now, Bott's at least 3 or 4 years away from living that type of a dream, but you look at it and there is every opportunity. And I think the gold standard right now is Penei Sewell. I probably should have mentioned that at the outset, but Penei Sewell, stud right tackle for the Detroit Lions. He is making oodles and oodles of money. There are many people who say that outside of really anybody, there is not a better, speaking of offensive lineman, there's not a better athlete in general, speaking of Penei Sewell, that plays offensive line in the NFL to this day. You also have guys like Jordan Mailata, who was a former rugby star who just won a Super Bowl as left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. Bott's looking and kind of reading the tea leaves out there and saying, hey, maybe, just maybe, offensive line is my ticket, my meal ticket to going and making a bunch of money playing the game I love. I'm not saying that Bott couldn't be an elite defensive tackle because let's just put it this way. If it doesn't work out at offensive tackle, let's say he just doesn't take to the position, whatever, the position change doesn't happen, all you do is flip him back to playing that hybrid defensive tackle role at 6'4", 275, 280, whatever he weighs. He has been a one-man wrecking crew for a long time. And if offensive line ultimately isn't for him, flip him back over to the defense and just say, hey, Bott, go make plays. That's the thing about this. This is a two-way opportunity for a star player. And I hope that BYU remains in the mix for the foreseeable future because the fact that Bott is back on the market, that's a really, really nice thing for BYU to go out and pursue him. And fingers crossed they can bring him in because I think Bott would be a really, really nice piece to have in BYU's offensive line room because it sure looks like he is going to max out his potential playing on the offensive side of the football. All right, that is going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the show. As always, thank you for all of your support. Had plans to talk a little bit more about recruiting. I talked about Bott today. We'll get more into that on tomorrow's show. We'll also be out at BYU football practice later this afternoon. You want the insider report? Join the Locked On Cougars insider group. You'll get those updates from me via text message as soon as that practice goes final. So join us today on the Locked On Cougars insider group. But more importantly, thank you as always for your guys' support of the podcast. You guys make this thing go. So thank you for downloading it, subscribing to it, rating it, reviewing it, sharing it with your family and friends. And as always, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.